Tonight's guest is Zeea Darling. We're excited to have her. She is an Appalachian witch, a spiritual teacher, and she's the owner of Great Southern Gothic, which is the curiosity shop and magic supply in West Jefferson, North Carolina. Zeea, welcome to the world of curiosities.
Hey, thank you for having me on. It's good to be here talking with you tonight about one of our favorite subjects.
And you're right, tonight's topic is going to be about Appalachian Granny Witches, women, but in specific, their practices. So, Zia, of all of the items that they use and the practices that they do, what was the most important thing that a granny witch would use in her magic?
Well, um, I would say when it comes to like the faith healing aspect, the Bible would probably be something that they would utilize a lot because, if you didn't have anything else to your disposal, you at least had your Bible, and they would use different prayers from that and in their faith healing, put hands on people, and they would repeat it usually 3 times, and uh, sometimes they would like make the sign of the cross, and if 3 was a holy number, of course, and they would end it with the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. That was the most simplistic for healing modality was the use of prayer, I think.
All right, in the mountains, we have witches, some people would call them witches, who are able to stop blood. What can you tell us about that?
So there were different uh, parts of the Bible that people used for different things. And so, yeah, stopping blood was one of them. And there was actually a couple different ones that you could use. But one of them here is, "This is the day on which the injury happened. Blood thou must stop until the Virgin Mary bring forth another son." And then you would repeat that 3 times. A lot of this stuff, you would repeat it 3 times. Because, like I said, 3 is a holy number, the Trinity.
There's different phrases in the Bible that this is attributed to, and another one is Mark 5:29. He can stop the bleeding. It is by the wounds of God's Son, Jesus Christ, that we are healed. And then the one that I couldn't remember earlier when we talked about this was Ezekiel 16:6, King James Bible. And when I passed by thee and saw thee polluted in thine own blood, I said unto thee, when thou wast in thy blood, live. Yea, I said unto thee, when thou wast in thy blood, live. So it's really interesting. So a blood witch, though, could stop using any of these that they chose to use.
Yeah. And also stuff like taking the fire out of burns, talking the fire out of burns. I think they had probably a Bible verse for that.
And you know what, Zia, even if they didn't have a Bible verse, they would have a prayer. They would definitely be saying prayers when they were doing this work.
If babies had thrush, that was a common thing back then. They could cure that. Yeah, I mean, there were so many things that they did like that.
The Bible obviously was a big part of it.
Yeah, but the Bible was kind of like that was their spell book.
Some people call it their book of shadows or their grimoire. I know some people would hate that equivalency, but it really is true because they derive such power from those words that are written in the Bible.
Yeah. And then people that were known as powwows, that the Pennsylvania Dutch people, a lot of their information they got from uh, John George Homan's. This is not what it's called. It says Powwows, an American Grimoire. So George Homan's book, The Long Lost Friend, is what the Pennsylvania Dutch or the German people that immigrated to America were familiar with using that book, like in the 1800s, and it had a lot of the different cures in it. So that was something they utilized, as well as the Osman and Steele books.
And when you were doing your research, what really struck you about powwow practice?
Well, I think what made me drawn to it anyway was that it's part of my heritage, and it makes a lot of sense from the superstitions and stuff I grew up with. I'm like, where does this come from? But powwow, what I'm learning from some of the books by Silver Ravenwolf, is that It can be a way to heal whatever your actual belief system is. So as long as you believe in the divine and the higher power and you allow that to work through you and understand that it's not you and your power, that it's, something you're channeling from the divine to help heal people, and, just putting your focus and intent on that, and working that magic and the healing through you. I think that's what was very striking to me, is like realizing that, just the belief in that higher power, and yeah, just yeah, it's God.
I love that, and it really is God. It's all about that energy. We don't create that type of energy, but as humans, some of us, and most of us, have the ability to draw down that energy.
And grannies and power doctors, they didn't take any payment for their work. They were it because their belief was that it wouldn't work anymore if they did. Sort of like when you think about using your powers for gain, you don't want to do that. You want it to be, that's what the Granny Witch was there for, is to be the healer of their community.
There was a balance in that they could and did often barter.
Yes, that was important too.
But as far as money exchange, and I think one of the reasons that was true is during that time, when we think back in the olden days, in my granny's day, when, there were so many granny women in the mountains, and that is that, people were poor. There was no money here.
You had to be very resourceful, and yeah, you had to use like stuff around the house.
Whatever was around the house. Let me ask, you mentioned powwow. A lot of folks won't know what powwow is, like where it comes from, and who actually wielded it or used it. So could you tell us something about that?
So it's the Pennsylvania Dutch people. I mean, it's like the Germans that immigrated to Pennsylvania and then, spread out along this further south, and that's how I have that um, lineage. But they were very superstitious, as some people would use the word superstitious, but they had a lot of interest in beliefs, and they believed in like using astrology to plant their crops, and or the moon phases, do stuff, certain things in different phases of the moon. It's very extensive. We'd probably have to do a whole video talking about when to do what and stuff, but you can use a farmer's almanac, which my grandparents did when I was younger. I remember they had like a farmer's almanac calendar. So that, I think, really it made me be interested in the kind of like astrological signs, and yeah, just astrology in general after that.
Well, how did powwow get its name?
So powwow is like, there's a couple different things that I've researched on that. So powwow, they say it could come from the native peoples and their traditions, and they're like, yeah, I want to say shamanic traditions, but like a medicine man and their dreaming and how they learn to use these herbs and what they're for and stuff like that. So there was that. But then I also read that it was termed powwow because, okay, I'll say this first. Power doctor is like a kind of, and then so it's kind of like power, powwow. But then also, uh, people compare it. I also have read that it was like people compared what the Germans were doing to the natives, and that's how it was like powwow. Like they just, like it was their own separate tradition. So I'm not sure if it was like, the two cultures were coming together and sharing things, which is probably true, or if it's just they both had these similar healing modalities, and that's what they like compared it to be similar, kind of thing.
I truly think that probably all of that is true. It was a mixture of all of these things. And one of the things I'd read, which I thought was interesting, is back in the day, English speaking people were called the English. I mean, from England, those who had migrated from that way, and they had a very low opinion of the Dutch, of the Germans. And so they did, they said, "Well, it's powwow." And it was really a derogatory comment. As you mentioned, you had mentioned that it was a comparison, and you're right. But for people that these, Pennsylvania Dutch called the English, it was actually being disparaged, but they embraced it, and it is what their magic is known now as powwow.
Yeah, I'm glad you said it that way. I was having a hard time presenting that.
You did an excellent job with that. Just added a few details. Okay, so what were common practices that you might find in Granny Witch or Granny Woman magic?
So, other than using the Bible, they would probably use like household items if they couldn't go to the pharmacy. So, some things like even as simple as a potato, a tater, as we would say. So, if you got burned, I read that you could, this was something I read in the uh, Foxfire books. So if you got burned, just cut the potato in half and then stick it on your wrap a rag around it and just leave it there till it turns brown and you won't it won't be burning anymore. Also, I meant to say this at the beginning of everything. Uh, Now this is nothing bad. A potato won't hurt you, but other stuff we might talk about like herbs and stuff. Me and you always like to give the warning or preface that some of the stuff we talk about we might not want to use it anymore these days, but some stuff actually is still helpful. But definitely do your research and everything before you would try this. Okay, so the fatback, my mama said that she had a boil on the back of her leg when she was little, and her mama put the fat back on there and wrapped it up with a rag, and it made it bust open. And I said, "Well, what made you get that boil, And she said, "My mama said it's because I had bad blood." And so she gave her sulfur for that. So that was like something you could get at a general store or pharmacy. And I'm guessing it was powdered actual sulfur, and you would mix it with like caro syrup or honey and take it that way on a spoon. And sulfur is natural in our foods that we eat, and it's something we need for our body's healing and health. And if you look it up, it actually says that it is cancer fighting and other good things about it too. But that was the main thing. So, and then there was stuff like lard was used a lot. That was something that was like a multi-purpose thing. Like lard and castor oil you could use it for several different things, and people still use castor oil a lot to this day. And you'll hear about the craze these days of people using tallow, the beef fat for their skincare and all that. But the one thing Mama said too is that whenever her and her siblings had like the croup, like a chest cold, that you would mix lard and turpentine or maybe camphor, and both camphor and turpentine are like that very menthol eucalyptus sinus opening smells, very strong. They're from trees. So well, I mean, camphor comes from trees. So um you get like these little camphor tablets. By the way, it's not real camphor. It's just little pieces of little pieces of clay that I use to represent it. So what my mama actually did, she would put the camphor tablets into some moonshine in a jar and shake it up till it dissolves, and then you would rub that on sore muscles. But what I was saying about her mom was like either turpentine or camphor mixed with lard, put it on the chest, and cover it with like a wool, whatever you'll call it, like a piece of wool, so it would stay on there and wet or whatever. So you can get, it was old timey Vicks Vapor Rub. This is before they had Vicks Vapor Rubs. That's what they would use. And there was the castor oil. Like I said, I had this is a bottle that I use. You can use it for all different kinds of things. Definitely look up on that. People sometimes use it just for their like hair growth and skincare and stuff like that. But my mama said that her mom made her drink castor oil because that's supposed to help you if you're constipated. And she just said that her mom said it was good for her. So she would just make her drink it by spoonfuls and stuff. So my mama was about to turn 80. So apparently there was something good to these remedies. like I said, a lot of this stuff is stuff that we wouldn't even use today. And when I was kind of thinking that was kind of funny was like, they say for a cough, smoke tobacco, but see, obviously that's not a good idea. And stuff like, if a kid has an earache, that you would blow tobacco smoke in their ear. Or this is a real funny one, putting pee in their ear for ear infection. So,
And it has to be warm pee.
yeah, but yeah,
And some people said it had to be the urine of the child or the adult whose ear was hurting, of course.
yeah, I guess that was part of sort of like a, I don't know, sympathetic magic or something, or just like having that connection tie, I guess makes sense also for the healing.
Zia, one of the things about Mountain Magic, there's a lot of sympathetic magic here
Yes.
and practical magic. I mean, those two I think are at the foundation of what Appalachian witches did and still do.
I think so, absolutely, because when you talk about folk magic, it's just like what comes naturally to you, and you're using like the resources around you. And
If you want the official definition, sympathetic magic is a magical modality that involves symbolically imitating the desired outcome.
it's interesting that they said modality because I've been using that word, and so it's like synchronicity. But I'm glad I was using the word correctly as well, because I was questioning. I'm like, wait, going back to the tater. So say that you have warts. This was apparently a big thing. A lot of people had warts back then. And another ailment I saw was swelling, and it was called dropsy. I'm not sure why, but I'll have to do more research. But anyway, if you had a wart, you could rub it on there. Then you would take it off your property and bury it, and then once it rotted, the warts would go away. Or another version said, put it under the eaves of your house where the water would drip off the house on it and it would rot there. And once it rotted, your warts would be gone. And there's other stuff too, like take somebody's stolen dish rag and rub it on the wart and then bury it. And I'm not sure why that would be a correspondence there, but I feel like a wart. This makes more sense for like a wart. Or I've read too, like if you had peas or something, one rub it on each wart, one pea for per wart, and then bury it, stuff like that. And like moonshine, that could be used for different things. It's pure alcohol. You could use to wash wounds. It cleanses anything. And I guess like for more advanced like medicine making, you could use moonshine to make a tincture with herbs. And but yeah, there was different herbs and stuff that they might have used. Like I've got some rabbit tobacco here. Rabbit tobacco. So people would smoke this like they would actual tobacco. And you could use it probably, or it's also called Life Everlasting. It has these little white and yellow flowers on them. And it smells pretty good too. It kind of smells like tobacco. And you could use that like a tea as well, for different ailments.
What would be one of the primary uses of that?
It's like for probably similar to mullein, like coughing kind of conditions like that. Respiratory, I think. If the leaves of things have like, they're kind of fuzzy, then that's probably to do with respiratory, because it's supposed to get the phlegm out. But let's see. I also have here some sassafras root. My mama talked about when she was little that her and her family would go forage and dig up the root. And this was a good blood purifier. That's what they used it for anyway. It smells really good. Has that root beer licoricey kind of smell. And yeah, these are a little bit that I've collected here. So whenever you're supposed to collect sassafras, has to be in early spring before the new leaves come out, because they say that the sap is in the roots, and that's when you want to harvest it, before it goes up the tree and the leaves open in later spring. And whenever you make a tea out of it, you boil the roots for 10 or 20 minutes or so, or till it gets darker, and then you sweeten it and you can have a nice beverage. And it purifies the blood, they say, cleanses it. And they would drink it during that early springtime to help get their bodies prepared for the work in the garden, and that come in spring and summer.
And they call it spring tonic. And if you've ever lived in the mountains, you were probably a victim of
Yeah,
one of the things that your granny would concoct and give to you, but it was supposed to revitalize you after a long winter in these mountains of not really having a lot of nutritional supplements outside of what they were able to can and what they had been able to dry as far as meats and that sort of thing. So it really did revitalize you.
yeah, and how the sap was in the roots and it would rise up the tree. That's kind of like your blood. It helped your blood rise back up to be, to be in working order. So another thing that you might have heard of is asafoetida, but like it was called aphidity. That's what I was told by one of my family members that they put like a little bit in a bag. They powdered, I believe, I think they would powder it. So it's very strong, potent smelling, like garlic and onion together. And they put it in a little bag around a baby's neck to help keep away sickness. And sometimes they might, chew on it and teeth on it. So that would be good because they're actually getting it into them to protect them from illness. But it was kind of actually just kind of like a charm bag type thing too. And it would smell the strong or like in medieval times, that strong smells are supposed to repel, negative and evil influence too. So that was the idea also behind that.
And during the plague, remember the plague doctor mask? It actually had a purpose. That long snout, they would pack it full of these very aromatic herbs that they knew would help to kill, maybe what they called evil influences or evil miasmas, and it supposedly helped keep them safe from the plague. Unfortunately, in many cases, it did not work. All right, Zia, this has been really fascinating. And I know we have to wrap up the episode, even though I don't want to, because we're learning so much here. But what was it about the Granny women and their practice that had some people across the mountain side-eyeing them and calling them a granny witch?
There's a lot of things actually. So one of them would be like going back to this book called The Long Lost Friend. They had like charms that you could write out on a piece of paper, fold it up, and carry it around with you for protection. If you wanted to protect your livestock, you could feed it to the livestock and they would eat it. And then there's stuff as far as the Pennsylvania Germans go, like hex signs that where they would paint these beautiful, intricate. It's almost like barn quilts that you see around here, and I think that's kind of where that kind of came from. But there's different symbolism within these um, designs that they would paint on their barns, and that would be to protect their livestock, and also they might put some on their home too. Is mainly for protection, good luck, stuff like that. And so there is interesting healing way of healing a child. So there, and this varies, like depending on who you talk to, it's similar ways, but they would do stuff with trees that kind of like transmute negative energy, like take it into the tree and it would be taken care of. But I had a family member tell me about like their aunt would, like, there was a child that had asthma, and so there was different ways, but one of the ways like bore a hole in the tree, put a little piece of the child's clothing or hair in the tree, and then cover the hole up. And then once the child outgrew that spot, they would outgrow the illness, things like that. So that seemed a little bit strange or different, witchy, weird. And like you'll hear a lot about in Appalachia, they would use divining rods, and in this book it describes how what kind of tree you would use, and what time to do it, and what to say to find water with your divining rod. Also iron ore, which I thought was interesting, like you can use it to find ore or treasure. And they done stuff by the moon phases, astrological signs. So people these days, that's a big thing in the witchy and pagan community. Is something that we do is astrology based and moon phases. Like right now, the parade of planets, the planets are aligned, and me and you are here having this conversation, and this will determine our future together and our destiny, you know. So I think that's something really cool about that. Major life events that I'm having that are uh, coinciding with the planets, and I think that's pretty interesting.
And in magic, we always say, as above, as below.
Yes,
What happens with the planets does affect us on Earth.
I believe so.
So did our grannies.
For Yeah, and grannies, they might do, like, no one in my family done this, but I've just always been drawn to like fortune telling, it always of divination and things like that. So I wonder if it is somewhere in my family line. It's something that it's coming back to me in the bloodline or something. But stuff like cartomancy, using playing cards, or how we do today with tarot cards to divine the future, or like find out about a situation. And stuff like tea leaf reading, I'm sure that was something they did in Appalachia, or you can use coffee grains. So that was probably things that people have seen as witchy. There's a lot of different little, what people call old wives' tales and superstitions and stuff like that.
Before we move on from this, I gotta mention that other people may have called them a granny witch, but they would have never called themselves that. I
Yeah,
mean, the
that's
the
true.
term witch, I mean, all of them had read about the Witch of Endor, and it was definitely not something that they wanted to be attached to for a lot of different reasons. One being, if you were the other, you could be in real trouble in the community and ostracized, and oftentimes you needed that community support. So they would term themselves granny women or granny healers or yarb doctors or moon doctors or yeah, or powwow or power doctors, anything like that. In fact, they would call them wise women, wise men, because there were also men who practiced in these mountains.
Yeah, and I was gonna bring up something.
Healing. They practiced healing.
Yes, yes. About something in that, and it would have, like, in this book here, charms about like how to protect yourself from witches, stuff like that, how to keep witches away, and don't do this, don't do that, stuff like that. So obviously, we understand there's good and evil, so that I believe there could be a good witch and a bad witch. But yeah, in those days,
It was always negative, and I gotta tell you, I always laugh about this, and I'm digressing. I'm going back to 1692. Sorry, I'm in Salem now. It's ADHD. But anyway, I always laugh and say that the witches were the ones that flipped the script. I mean, it was Ann Putnam and Mercy Lewis and the rest of them that were out in the woods with Tituba dancing under a full moon. That that is a witch thing to do. And then they turned state's evidence and literally turned their fingers. I always wondered, how in the world did this happen? They got busted for witchcraft, and the next thing you know, they are calling other townspeople who were probably almost 100% assuredly not witches, and they were the ones going, being hung. They were the ones going to desolate jails. I mean, the youngest victim was, I think, 4 or 5 years old, Doris, and it was horrible. She was ruined for life because of the trauma.
and I think a lot of people need to actually learn more about that history. They really don't even truly know about that, and they would really do good to learn about what actually went on and why, and not to be so judgmental of other people to where it's like gets to that extreme point. And the granny witches, they would notice signs and omens, and could predict the weather by the way animals were acting, or if you saw a certain animal, that would be an omen of something, or if you hear a hoot owl, it could mean something, or whippoorwill, certain things like that. And I guess some people would say that's superstitions, but it was their belief.
Before people roll their eyes and say superstitions, and you know what I'm talking about, people have to realize that, and really think about the connection that our forebears in these mountains truly had with nature.
Like looking for signs and omens, like a certain, there's a certain flower in bloom, now is the time for this, or certain things like that too. like how they would do their agriculture was very planned and structured by things in nature around them, including the solar system, you know. And then I recently watched the movie Cold Mountain, and so there was a granny witch in that, you know. Have you seen that one?
I don't think I've seen that one. I'll have to
I don't
write it
know, it's
down.
kind of sad at the ending, so but it's based on a book, but it's based,
Does it have the Nicole Kidman?
yeah.
I did see it. Oh, yes, I
Yeah,
remember
sorry,
now.
I'm late on watching that one, but so yeah, it's not like it's gonna be a spoiler at this point if I said anything, but no, I'm not gonna really spoil anything. But there was a granny witch in it, and she made a salve or like poultices and stuff to heal the soldier, which is like the main character of the story. And I thought that was pretty interesting. And she was very like self-reliant, but it's based in North Carolina in a fictional place called Cold Mountain, but it's in Appalachia or like the Blue Ridge or Smoky Mountain area. And one thing I wanted to say about that also was that there was an interesting way of divination in it. So she wanted to know, you know, when was her love, when was he going to come back from war? Was he alive? Or because she'd been writing him all these letters and stuff, and he wasn't getting half of them. And during the war, Civil War, and you know, obviously there was no cell phones back then. We couldn't track our boyfriend and know what was going on and when they was gonna come back from war or anything. So what she done with her neighbors told her to do was go to the well, and they were helping her. They're like holding her, you know, and she had a mirror, and she was trying to see the reflection behind her in the mirror, and then she saw him coming back to her. She saw a vision. So that was a way that you could divine stuff and try to find things out.
All right, Zia, thank you so much for being with us tonight. We appreciate it, and we've learned so much from us. I certainly have, and I'm sure our audience will. It's always a pleasure to talk with you, and she's just a joy. And on the screen, you see right underneath her name is the connection to her shop, her website. And so you have another website. Is this the one that you're working on right now, or is there another one that you're working on? Tell us how to get in touch with you.
So Great Southern Gothic is my main, you know, actual website, but then I also have a couple of little Facebook pages. So we got Great Southern Gothic that represents that, but then I also had an offshoot one that I'm calling Southern Gothic Mountain Witch, that you can follow me there, and I'll be posting more spiritual information like this, and you know, stuff on the folk magic and granny witch lifestyle on there. So I think that's about all I wanted to say was, yeah, Southern Gothic Mountain Witch. And that's on Facebook and Instagram. And I guess I'm doing some stuff on TikTok too, so you could find me there maybe. But we'll see with that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And until next time, Pat O'Keefe's World of Curiosities. Stay curious.